The first kick broke her teeth. The second one was meant to make sure she stayed on the floor and remembered who ran this town. The rich man's son laughed, wiping her blood off his boot like it was nothing more than spilled sauce. What he never noticed was the old biker at the counter, the one he'd pushed past without a glance. The man who'd once walked through worse war zones than this greasy diner. The man who'd buried friends because of men just like him. When that biker quietly set down his coffee and turned around, he wasn't just standing up for a waitress. He was standing up against an entire family's grip on a town. If you believe people who abuse power should be held accountable, hit subscribe now, because this story is proof that sometimes the right stranger changes everything. Now, let's go back to where this nightmare really began. 5 hours earlier, Danya Creel had been thinking about her son's birthday cake. Chocolate or vanilla? Brinley had asked that morning while she braided his hair before school. Both, Mama, both. Baby, we can't afford both. Then whichever makes you smile. Mama, you don't smile enough. That conversation played on repeat in Danya's head as she refilled coffee cups at the Silver Star Diner, her feet screaming in their worn sneakers. 11:30 at night, and she still had 4 hours left on her double shift. Tomorrow she'd work another double. The day after that, too, because rent on the motor court cabin was due Friday, and she was $300 short again. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. Danya hated that sound, hated this place, hated the grease that clung to her clothes no matter how many times she washed them. But it was a job, and jobs were hard to come by in this dried-up Nevada town where the Breslin family owned half the real estate and controlled the rest through fear. More coffee, Mr. Paxton? She asked the old man in booth 3. He was asleep, head tilted back, mouth open, snoring softly. At 81, Mr. Paxton spent most nights here because his house was too quiet after his wife died. Danya left him alone. Some loneliness you couldn't fix with conversation. The bell above the door chimed. 4 men walked in, moving with that particular kind of silence that Danya had learned to recognize over the years. Military men, or former military. They wore leather jackets despite the Nevada heat, boots that had seen serious miles, and expressions that said they'd seen worse things than whatever this diner could offer. They took the counter seats without asking, settling in with practiced efficiency. The leader, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-50s with gray threading through his dark hair and a scar cutting across his knuckles, made eye contact with Danya and nodded once. Respectful. That was new. Danya grabbed menus and headed over, her body moving on autopilot while her mind calculated bills. Medical insurance for Brinley, electric bill, the check engine light that had been glowing in her dashboard for 3 weeks. Her husband's life insurance had run out 8 months ago, and she was drowning in the aftermath of his death. 2 years now. 2 years of single parenting and double shifts and telling her son that tomorrow would be better, even though tomorrow never was. Evening, gentlemen, what can I get you? The scarred leader looked up. His eyes were gray, storm cloud gray, and something about them made Danya stand a little straighter, like he actually saw her, not just a waitress, a person. Coffee, black, he said. His voice was rough, like gravel under tires. And whatever's hot, we're not picky. Burgers are good. Burgers are perfect, ma'am. Ma'am. Another thing that was new. Most men who came through here treated her like furniture. The other 3 ordered quickly, efficiently. No jokes, no flirting, no grabbing at her wrist when she wrote down their orders. Just 4 men who wanted food and coffee and to be left alone. Danya could work with that. She put in their order and went back to her station behind the counter, wiping down surfaces that were already clean because staying busy kept the anxiety at bay. Through the window, she could see their motorcycles lined up outside like metal soldiers. Big bikes, expensive, the kind that ate highway miles for breakfast. The coffee pot was halfway to their table when the door slammed open hard enough to rattle the blinds. Danya's stomach dropped before she even turned around. She knew that walk. That particular stumble swagger of a drunk man with too much money and too little conscience. Baylor Breslin stood in the doorway, reeking of whiskey and entitlement. His shirt was unbuttoned, his eyes unfocused, and his mouth twisted into that smirk Danya had learned to hate over the past 8 months. Ever since his father, Mayor Thaddeus Breslin, had bought the motor court where she lived and put Baylor in charge of property management. Well, Baylor's words slurred together. If it isn't my favorite tenant. Danya's hand tightened on the coffee pot. We're closing soon. Baylor, you should head home. Don't tell me what to do. He pointed at her, the gesture loose and aggressive. You're 5 days late on rent. Danya. 5 days. I told you I'll have it Friday. I get paid Friday. Friday's not good enough. He started toward her, and Danya could smell the Jack Daniels sweating through his pores. You know what I think? I think you're not taking this seriously. I think you need a lesson in respect. The 4 men at the counter had stopped talking. Danya felt their attention shift, felt the temperature in the room change. But she kept her eyes on Baylor, because looking away was weakness, and men like Baylor Breslin lived on weakness. Please leave, Danya said quietly. I don't want trouble. Baylor laughed, a wet, nasty sound. You don't want trouble, sweetheart? You are trouble. Late rent, single mother, living in my motor court like you own the place. You know what my father says about people like you. I don't care what your father says. The words were out before Danya could stop them. Baylor's face went red, then purple. What did you just say to me? I said. Danya's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. I don't care. I'll have your money Friday. Now leave. Baylor's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. The coffee pot slipped, hot liquid splashing on the counter. You don't talk to me like that, Baylor hissed, pulling her closer. His breath was rancid in her face. You don't get to tell me no. My family owns this town. We own you. Let go of me. Make me. Danya tried to pull away, but Baylor's grip tightened. His other hand came up, palm open, and she flinched. Years of living with fear had taught her body to expect violence even when her mind said it wouldn't happen, not here, not in public. But the slap never came. Instead, Baylor released her wrist and stepped back, grinning. That's what I thought. You're all talk. Danya, just like every other broke single mom who thinks she's special. He turned toward the door, and Danya's whole body sagged with relief. It was over. He was leaving. She could clean up, finish her shift, go home to Brinley, and Baylor spun back around. You know what? I changed my mind. You're out Friday. Pack your things and get out of my motor court. You can't do that. I have a lease. I can do whatever I want. Baylor stepped closer again, and this time there was something darker in his eyes, something that made Danya's skin crawl. This town belongs to my family. The cops work for us. The judges work for us. You think anyone's going to help you? Please, Danya hated the way her voice broke. Please, my son. Should have thought about your son before you disrespected me. The scarred man from the counter stood up. He didn't move fast, didn't rush, just stood slowly, deliberately, and suddenly Baylor looked small. Son, the man said quietly, I think you should leave the lady alone. Baylor whirled around, his drunken brain taking a moment to process the interruption. Who the hell are you? Nobody important, just someone who's asking you politely to leave. This doesn't concern you, old man. Actually, the scarred man said, it does, because I'm sitting here trying to enjoy my coffee and you're disturbing my peace. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Leave the lady alone. Baylor laughed. Or what? The other 3 men stood up, not aggressive, not threatening, just standing, present, and something in Baylor's whiskey-soaked brain finally registered danger. This is my town, Baylor said, but his voice had lost its confidence. My father's the mayor. You don't know who you're messing with. Son, I've dealt with warlords and cartel bosses. I'm not particularly worried about a drunk trust fund kid with daddy issues. The scarred man's voice never rose, never hardened. He stated facts the way other men stated the weather. Now walk out that door before this gets ugly. Danya watched Baylor's face cycle through emotions. Fear, rage, humiliation. She'd seen this before. Her late husband used to get that exact look right before he broke something, right before he made someone pay for making him feel small. Screw you, Baylor spat. Then he turned back to Danya. And screw you too. You broke witch. You and your brat are out on the street Friday, and there's not a thing you can do about it. He grabbed Danya's shoulder, spinning her around. She stumbled, caught herself on the counter. Baylor's hand tangled in her hair, yanking her head back. Look at me when I'm talking to you. The scarred man moved. Danya didn't see it coming. 1 second Baylor was behind her, fist tangled in her hair, his other hand drawing back. The next second Baylor was flying backward, a look of complete shock on his face as he crashed into an empty table. Stay down, the scarred man said. Baylor didn't stay down. He got up, roaring, and charged at the scarred man, fists swinging wildly. Drunk, stupid, angry. The scarred man sidestepped easily, caught Baylor's arm, twisted, and Baylor went down again, harder this time, face first into the floor with a crunch that made Danya wince. "Last warning," the scarred man said. Baylor pushed himself up, blood streaming from his nose. His eyes found Danya, found her standing there shaking, coffee pot still in her hand, and something in his expression went from rage to something worse, something calculated. "You think they can protect you?" Baylor laughed, blood bubbling between his teeth. "You stupid woman. You have no idea what you just started." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. "Put the phone down," the scarred man said. "Screw you." Baylor's fingers moved across the screen. "My father's going to bury all of you. You, these bikers, this whole diner." The scarred man looked at Danya. "Do you want to press charges against him?" Danya's mouth went dry. Press charges against a Breslin in a town the Breslin family owned. I don't. Simple question, ma'am. Yes or no? Did he assault you? Yes, but no buts. The scarred man pulled out his own phone. "You were assaulted. That's a crime. We're witnesses." "You don't understand," Danya whispered. "His family." "I understand perfectly." The scarred man's eyes never left hers. "I understand that you're scared. I understand that powerful men get away with terrible things. I understand that you probably think no one will help you. But I'm standing here right now asking you one question. Do you want to press charges?" Danya looked at Baylor, bleeding on the floor, phone in hand, smirking like he'd already won. She thought about Brinley, about the motor court cabin, about every time in the past 2 years she'd swallowed her pride and her fear and her rage because fighting back was too dangerous. She thought about her late husband and how he'd made her feel small every single day until the day he died. She thought about Brinley asking her to smile more. "Yes," Danya said. "Yes, I want to press charges." Baylor's smirk vanished. "You're dead, you hear me? You're dead." He lunged at Danya, hands reaching for her throat, and this time there was murder in his eyes, pure unfiltered entitled rage at being told no. The scarred man intercepted him easily, but Baylor was beyond reason now, beyond fear, beyond everything except the need to hurt someone who dared to stand up to him. Baylor's boot caught the scarred man's shin, not enough to stop him, but enough to make him shift his balance, enough for Baylor to break free. He came at Danya like a charging bull. She saw his fist coming, saw it pulling back, registered in some distant part of her brain that he wasn't going to slap her. He was going to punch her, really punch her. But before his fist could connect, Baylor pivoted. His steel-toed boot came up in a vicious arc, catching Danya square in the face. The world exploded into stars and pain and the taste of copper. Danya felt her teeth shatter, felt her jaw crack, felt herself falling, the ground rushing up to meet her, and then nothing. Nothing but darkness and the distant sound of shouting and Brinley's voice in her memory. "Whichever makes you smile, Mama." Danya's eyes opened to a ceiling she did not know. The lights were too bright, the air too clean. For a moment she thought she was still on the diner floor, but then the pain hit all at once, a heavy wave that started at her mouth and rolled up through her skull. Her jaw felt like it had been welded shut. She tried to move it, and fire shot through her face. A soft voice near her shoulder said, "Don't try to talk, honey. Your jaw is wired. Just breathe." Danya turned her eyes instead. A nurse in her 50s, with tired eyes and a badge that said Nurse Kellen, adjusted the drip by the bed. "You're at County General. You've been through surgery. That man did a number on you. But you're still here. That's what matters." Danya tried to ask about Brinley, but the sound that came out was a broken hum. Nurse Kellen seemed to understand anyway. "Your little boy is fine. He's with Mrs. Greeley at the motor court. And there's a man in the waiting room who keeps asking about you. Big man, biker jacket, looks like he could break the bed in half, but says please and thank you. He's been here since they brought you in." Fear flashed through Danya. "Baylor?" She tried to lift her hand to rip out the wires, to run, but her arm felt like sand. Nurse Kellen laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Not that man. A different one. The one who rode in the ambulance with you. Said his name is Rourke. Said to tell you he's not going anywhere." Danya's eyes filled with tears of relief and confusion. Why would a stranger stay? The door opened. A woman with sharp eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair stepped in, white coat moving around her like a cape. "Ms. Creel, I'm Dr. Elvira Quinn. I'm the one who put your jaw back together." She pulled a stool closer and sat, meeting Danya's gaze squarely. "You have a bilateral fracture. Both sides of your jaw were broken. You lost 2 front teeth. Your cheekbone is bruised, but not shattered. With time and care, you will heal." Danya listened, not just to the words but to the tone. Firm, steady. No pity, but no coldness either. Dr. Quinn held up a small folder. I've taken full photos. Detailed notes. I documented everything. I've worked in this town 20 years. I know what the Breslin family does when they think nobody's watching. You're not the first woman to come in here hurt like this. You are the first to have a room full of witnesses and a biker who refuses to sit down. Danya's throat tightened. She tried to say thank you, but the wires made it a broken sound. Dr. Quinn squeezed her hand. Rest. There will be hard choices coming. You don't have to make them alone. Out in the waiting room, Rourke Halden paced grooves into the cheap tile. His brothers sat scattered on plastic chairs. Kieran pretended to read an old magazine. Darren watched the entrance like a guard dog. Maddox scrolled his phone, sending messages to people whose names he did not say out loud. The night staff had already learned to give them space. They weren't loud. They weren't rude. They were just there. Solid, unmoving, like a wall someone had forgotten to build around Danya years ago. When Nurse Kellen called his name, Rourke straightened. She's awake, but she's wired. You can't stay long, and you can't make her talk. He nodded and stepped into the room, feeling suddenly too big for it. Machines beeped softly. Danya lay propped up, face swollen beyond recognition, eyes too bright in a mask of bruises. For a heartbeat, he saw someone else there. His sister, years ago, on a different hospital bed in a different town where nobody had stood up in time. Hey there, he said quietly. Name's Rourke. We didn't get that far back at the diner. Her gaze sharpened at the sound of his voice. She tried to speak, winced instead. He lifted a hand. Don't. The doctor said you're wired shut for weeks. You'll get good at nodding and glaring. His mouth twitched, something like a shadow of humor. She gave the smallest hint of a nod. Your boy is safe, he said. My buddy Jorda rode out to the motor court. Mrs. Greeley has him. He thinks you had an accident and had to stay at the hospital. She feeds kids for fun. He's going to come back heavier. A wet shine filled Danya's eyes. She lifted her hand a few inches off the blanket. Rourke stepped closer, let her fingers brush his wrist. She was shaking. He wrapped his hand gently around hers, careful of the foreline. You did the hard part, he said. You said yes. You said you wanted to press charges. That takes guts. I know men twice your size who can't manage that word. Danya squeezed his hand, a weak, desperate pressure. The room hummed with machines and fear and something new, something like the first breath after being held underwater too long. Outside the hospital walls, the town kept its old rhythm. Neon signs flickered over empty streets. Somewhere on the hill, in a big house with too many windows, Mayor Thaddeus Breslin was shouting into a phone. His son sat in an exam room of his own with cotton in his nose and fury in his chest, swearing that this wasn't over, that he'd bury every biker, every cop, every waitress who forgot her place. Men like him were used to the world bending. If you believe money should never be more powerful than the truth, hit like right now. Every time you do, this kind of story reaches one more person who needs to remember that standing up is still possible. Rourke barely slept that night. He sat in the vinyl chair by Danya's bed until his back screamed, then stood and paced, then sat again when the monitors beeped wrong. In the early blue of morning, a young man in a tan uniform stepped into the room and cleared his throat. Deputy Ryland Cates, ma'am. He nodded to Danya, then to Rourke. I need to take a statement while things are still fresh. Rourke straightened. She can't talk. Doctor wired her shut. I know, the deputy said. I brought a board. He set a small whiteboard and marker on the tray table. Ma'am, I'm not going to push. But the sooner we get your side, the harder it is for anyone to twist it later. Danya looked from the board to Rourke. Her hand trembled as she reached for the marker. Rourke gently slid the tray closer. They took it slow. Ryland asked simple questions. Your full name. The date. Do you know who attacked you? Danya wrote in jagged letters, stopping often when pain flashed across her eyes. Yes, Baylor Breslin. He threatened eviction. He grabbed me. He kicked me. Rourke filled in the parts she couldn't write. How Baylor had come in drunk, what he'd said about owning the town, the way he'd grabbed her hair, the sound of the boot hitting bone. Ryland wrote it all down in neat block letters on an official form. His jaw tightened more with every detail. When they finished, he signed and slid the paper to Danya. If you agree this is true, make a mark here. She scrawled a crooked X. Her fingers left a smear where the pen slipped. Ryland carefully folded the statement, tucked it into a folder already thick with other papers. I'm going to file this right now, he said. And for what it's worth, ma'am, I'm sorry. This should have been stopped a long time ago. After he left, Danya blinked back tears. She picked up the marker again and scribbled on the board. Why are you helping? She held it up at Rourke. He took a slow breath. 10 years ago, he said, my sister needed help. Her boyfriend was a cop. Everyone told her nobody would believe her. She called me once, crying, and I told her I'd come. But I was deployed. Paperwork, chain of command, plane tickets. I was 2 days late. He swallowed, eyes fixed on some point past Danya's shoulder. She died alone on a kitchen floor. Everyone said they were sorry. Nobody had stood up when it would have mattered. Danya's eyes blurred. She reached for his hand again. He let her hold on. I told myself, he said softly, that if I ever sat in a room and heard a woman say yes, I want to press charges against a man like that, I would make sure she didn't feel alone. Not for 1 second. So here we are. Not exactly the retirement ride I had planned, but life's funny like that. A small, broken laugh tried to escape Danya's chest and turned into a painful hiss. Rourke raised a hand. Easy. Doc will kill me if I make her patient pop a wire. He sat back, studied her carefully. You're stronger than you think, Danya Creel. You worked doubles while carrying the weight of a whole town on your back. This. He nodded toward the door, where the world and the Breslins waited. This is just the part where you let other people carry some of it. Later that afternoon, Dr. Quinn came back with a different look in her eyes. There's going to be a bail hearing today, she said. The Breslins move fast when they're scared. The district attorney is nervous. The chief is already getting calls. I plan to be there. I have my photos, my notes, and I'm not going to let anyone pretend this is anything less than what it is. Aggravated assault. With a boot. On a woman who was at work, doing her job. Danya's heart pounded. Images crashed through her mind. Baylor's boot. The orange eviction notices she'd seen on other doors when tenants complained. Brinley's small bed in their cramped cabin. She picked up the board. They will evict me. Take my son. It was barely legible, the marker lines shaking. Dr. Quinn read it, then looked at Rourke. Have you told her about options? Not yet, he said. I figured one battle at a time. Dr. Quinn nodded. Fair. But we don't have the luxury of slow. Thaddeus will already be drawing up papers. She turned back to Danya. You have more power than you think when you're not the only one talking. You have me. You have this man who won't leave that chair. You have a deputy who just risked his job to file a report. The trick with bullies like the Breslins is that they count on everyone staying scared alone. When scared people group up, they stop being quiet. If you've ever watched someone with money and a big last name get away with things nobody else could, drop a comment that says, not anymore. Every single one is another person refusing to stay quiet alone. Danya closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the throb of her broken jaw, the burn of fear in her chest, and under it all, a thin, unfamiliar thread. Not safety, not yet, but something pointing in that direction. She opened her eyes, wrote one more word on the board, and turned it so both of them could see. Fight. Rourke smiled for the first time since the diner. Then we fight, he said, starting with this hearing. You rest. We'll go tell a judge exactly what Baylor Breslin did to you. And this time, he added, looking toward the door like he could already see the mayor's face, when the rich man's son laughs, somebody is finally going to write it down. The courthouse was colder than the hospital, even though the air outside baked in desert heat. Fluorescent lights hummed, papers shuffled, and the old wooden benches creaked under the weight of people who pretended they were only there by accident. Danya was not among them. Dr. Quinn had forbidden it. Your blood pressure is already too high, she'd said. Let the ones with unbroken bones do the walking today. So Danya lay in her hospital bed, jaw wired, heart racing, a cheap phone on her chest. Rourke had propped it there before he left. When it rings, he'd said, just listen. Don't try to talk. We'll carry the words for you. Now she stared at the ceiling and counted the beats between every breath, between every footstep of the nurses in the hall, between every bad scenario her mind could draw. The phone finally buzzed. Her fingers fumbled, but she hit accept on the third try. A jumble of sound crashed through, voices, shuffling, the faint echo of a microphone in a high-ceilinged room. Then Rourke's voice, a little softer than usual. We're in, he said. Judge is here. DA's here. Mayor looks like a man chewing gravel. You just listen, Danya. You're not alone in this room, even if you're lying in that bed. A clerk called names. State versus Baylor Allen Breslin. The words sounded strange and right all at once, like a hymn in the wrong key. The district attorney, a young woman with a steady but nervous tone, Maris Dunley, began to lay out the charge. Aggravated assault. Repeated prior complaints. Witnesses. Video from the diner's security camera. Medical reports from County General. Each word built a small step under Danya's fear. Then another voice took over. Smooth, expensive, flown in from the city. Baylor's lawyer painted an opposite picture with calm confidence. Baylor as a pillar of the community. Baylor as a devoted son. Baylor as a victim of a barroom scuffle with four intimidating motorcycle men and an overstressed waitress who may have slipped in her own spilled coffee. Baylor's father chimed in, when aloud, talking about jobs and taxes and how much his family had done for this town. In her hospital bed, Danya gripped the sheet so hard her knuckles whitened. She could not scream. The wires would turn any shout into raw pain. Her eyes burned instead. She stared at the ceiling tile above her, counting the little gray dots, and felt the old, familiar weight of "no one will believe you" pushing down on her chest again. Then a new sound cut through the hum. Rourke's voice, louder now, directed at the judge. "Your Honor, permission to speak." "You're a witness, Mr. Halden, not counsel," the judge replied. "Yes, ma'am. Just a witness. A witness who watched Baylor Breslin kick Ms. Creel in the face with a steel-toed boot. Who watched her teeth hit the floor. Who watched him laugh while she bled." There was a rustle, chairs shifting. Someone coughed. On the phone, Danya could hear the paper in Rourke's hand as he unfolded it. "I also brought these," he said. "Prior police reports. 3 women over the last 5 years who filed complaints against Mr. Breslin. All 3 went nowhere. All 3 left town. 2 of them are willing to talk now. One of them recorded audio the night he hit her." The sound of a room holding its breath reached all the way into Danya's hospital room. If you've ever seen someone tell half the story to protect a favorite son, and you wish the missing pages would finally land on the table, hit subscribe. Stories like this need people who want the whole truth, not the polished version. The lawyer objected, called it irrelevant, prejudicial, improper. The mayor raised his voice, talking about character assassination. The judge banged a gavel hard enough that even through the phone, Danya flinched. When order finally came back, the judge spoke with a cool, clipped patience that did not sound friendly to anyone. "Mr. Breslin," she said, "your son is charged with a very serious crime. We have a victim in the hospital with a wired jaw. We have photographs, statements, and multiple eyewitness accounts. This is not a parking ticket. This is not a boyish mistake. You would do well to remember that your last name is not a magic spell in this courtroom." Danya felt a strange, shaking laugh trying to climb up her chest. It hurt, but she let the feeling rise anyway. The judge continued. "Bail is set at $100,000. Mr. Breslin will surrender his passport. He will be confined to his residence with an ankle monitor. He will have no contact, direct or indirect, with Ms. Creel or her child. One more slip, and he sits in a cell until trial. Court is adjourned." The line went muffled for a second. She heard chairs scrape, voices blur. Then Rourke's voice came back, closer and softer. "You still there, Danya?" She breathed through her nose and tapped the phone twice with her finger. "Good," he said. "He's not walking free. Not really. He's boxed in, and for the first time in his life, people with robes and badges told him no. That's on you. You lit that fuse when you said yes." Tears slid sideways into Danya's hair. She had no words, and for once she did not feel weak because of it. Silence could be more powerful than noise when the right people were finally talking for you. Later that evening, Rourke walked back into the hospital room with dark circles under his eyes and determination etched even deeper into his face. His brothers trailed behind him, filling the doorway. The room felt smaller, but also somehow safer. Danya picked up her little whiteboard from the tray table. "What now?" she wrote. "Now," Rourke said, "we deal with the part the judge doesn't see." He reached into his leather jacket and pulled out a crumpled orange paper. "Found this taped to your door when we rode past the motor court. 3-day eviction notice. Effective immediately." Danya's vision blurred again. She grabbed the board harder than she meant to and scribbled 2 messy words. "He can." Rourke shook his head. "He thinks he can. There's a difference. This is retaliation. Illegal. I called someone who knows more about that than any of us." As if on cue, a woman stepped around the brothers and into the room. She wore jeans, a blazer, and boots dusty from the same parking lot they had crossed. Dark hair pulled back, eyes sharp as Dr. Quinn's, but with a different kind of fire. "Name's Celine Vero," she said. "I do housing law, and I owe Rourke a favor. He pulled me off a bad road in Colorado once when my engine died, and I was too proud to admit I'd run out of gas. Now he wants me to help you." She took the eviction notice and held it up like a piece of rotten fruit. "This is garbage," she said. "Even in this town. You have a lease. You're a victim in an active criminal case against the landlord's son. Him taping this to your door right after the assault? Judges love that kind of stupidity. Makes their job easy." Danya let out a thin, strangled sound that wanted to be a laugh. She picked up the board. "He owns cops, judges, everything." Celine read it and nodded. "He owns some people, sure. He's rented others. But not all of us. Not the ones in this room. Not Dr. Quinn. Not Deputy Cates, apparently. And not every judge in the district. The trick is to move fast and make enough noise in the right places that it's riskier to protect him than to do the job right." Rourke leaned against the end of the bed. "We're not asking you to believe everything will be easy," he said. "It won't. Baylor's going to thrash like a hooked fish. His daddy's going to pull every string he has. But you have something they never expected you to have." He nodded toward the others. "Us. If you think no woman should have to face a rich bully's family alone, drop a comment that says she's not alone. Everyone is another person in her corner." Celine pulled a notepad from her bag. "Here's what happens next," she said. "First, I file an emergency motion to freeze this eviction. We use the assault case, the hospital records, and the timing. Second, we document everything they do. Every note, every call, every little game. Third, we look at options for you so your whole life isn't tied to that motor court. No woman should have to raise a kid in a place where her landlord's son has tried to kill her." The last sentence hit Danya harder than any legal explanation. No one had said it so plain. She reached for the marker again. "Where would we go?" she wrote. Rourke cleared his throat. "There's another option," he said. "Not perfect, not fancy, but safe. For now." He told her about the house 20 miles outside town. A low, plain building with a long driveway and a big dog who thought he was a pillow. It belonged to no bank, no mayor, no landlord. Just to the four men who had spent most of their adult lives learning that homes sometimes had to be built from whoever was still standing after the dust settled. "You wouldn't owe us rent," he said. "Just respect and straight talk. You'd have your own room. Your boy would have a bed and a yard. You could breathe without staring at that motor court office every day." Celine glanced at him. "It's not a bad idea," she said. "Use it as a base while we fight the legal side. Keep you off their immediate target board." Fear crawled up Danya's spine. Another man's roof. Another set of rules. Another chance to be cornered. She wrote slowly. "Why trust you?" The room went quiet. Rourke didn't look insulted. If anything, he looked relieved that she was still suspicious. "You shouldn't," he said. "Not just because I say a few nice words. You trust people because of patterns. You've seen Baylor's. You're starting to see ours. We showed up. We called the ambulance. We stayed. We testified. We brought a lawyer. That's 4 pieces of evidence. You take your time adding them up." He pushed off the bed frame and stepped back, giving her space. "How about this?" he said. 1 week. You and Brinley come out to the house for 1 week. If you feel unsafe, if one thing feels wrong, you go back to town, and we put all our energy into making sure Thaddeus Breslin has to explain that eviction notice to a very irritated judge. No hard feelings." Danya stared at the board, at her own shaking hand, at 3 men and 1 woman and a nurse who had all, in their own ways, chosen to stand inside the blast radius of her decision. Her life had been ruled for years by what she feared might happen. For the first time, she let herself picture what might happen if she believed, just for a moment, that not all help came with hidden claws. She wrote 1 word. "Weak," then underlined it twice. Rourke nodded. "Weak it is. I'll go tell Mrs. Greeley to start packing the easy stuff. Clothes, school books, that superhero blanket your boy dragged to the diner once. We'll handle the heavy parts later." As they left the room to make calls and plans, Danya lay back against the pillows, wires in her jaw, pain in every breath, and something else settling quietly in her chest. Not safety, not yet, but something that rhymed with it closely enough to hold on to for the night. 3 days later, Danya left the hospital in borrowed clothes and a strange new silence. The wires in her jaw turned every word into careful noise, so she stopped trying. Rourke brought the truck around to the loading zone. Brinley sat in the back seat, clutching his superhero blanket, eyes wide and careful. "Mama," he whispered when he saw her. "You look different." She nodded and tried to smile with her eyes. She reached back, squeezed his hand, and felt his small fingers grip tight, like he was afraid she might vanish if he let go. The motor court sat low and dusty against the desert hills. As they pulled past it, Danya kept her face turned toward the window, so Brinley would not see her staring at cabin 14, where the orange eviction notice still hung crooked on the door. Mrs. Greeley had packed their things in plastic bins and garbage bags. Theron and Maddox had loaded them into the truck bed that morning while Danya was signing release forms. It all fit. 2 lives, 7 years of slow rebuilding after her husband's death, and it all fit in the back of a pickup. The road stretched long and flat. Brinley asked questions at first. "Where are we going? Are we coming back? Is the man who hurt you in jail?" Danya tapped answers on her phone's notepad and showed him the screen. "Safe place. For now. Yes, he is being watched." Brinley read each one carefully, then went quiet and leaned his head against the window. Outside, the desert rolled past in shades of tan and pale green under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Rourke's house appeared at the end of a gravel driveway that crunched under the tires like breakfast cereal. It was low and plain, painted a faded yellow that had probably been bright once. A porch wrapped around the front. Wooden chairs sat uneven on the boards. A huge black dog bounded down the steps, tail wagging so hard his whole back and moved with it. "That's Bear," Rourke said. "He thinks he's a lap dog. Good luck convincing him otherwise." Brinley's eyes lit up for the first time in days. "Can I pet him?" Rourke glanced at Danya. She nodded, and Brinley was out of the truck before she could blink. Bear met him halfway, slobbering and wagging and sniffing the boy like he was the most interesting thing in Nevada. Brinley laughed, a bright sound that cracked something open in Danya's chest. She had not heard him laugh in weeks. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and wood and something baking. Kieran stood at the stove, flipping what looked like pancakes even though it was 4 in the afternoon. Theron sat at the table cleaning a motorcycle part with a rag. Maddox leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching Danya like he was waiting for her to bolt. She did not blame him. She felt like bolting. "Your room's down the hall," Rourke said. "Second door on the right. Brinley's got the smaller one next to it. Bathroom's between. Not fancy, but it's clean and the lock works." He said that last part slow, letting it sink in. "The lock works. No one's coming through that door unless you open it." Danya walked down the narrow hallway, feeling the weight of eyes on her back. She pushed open the door to her room. A double bed with a quilt that looked handmade. A lamp on a small table. A window with curtains someone had ironed. Nothing special. Nothing expensive. But also nothing broken. No mold on the ceiling. No smell of old cigarettes baked into the walls. No sound of neighbors shouting through paper-thin dividers. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry without sound, shoulders shaking, wires pulling at her jaw. A soft knock came a few minutes later. Brinley poked his head in. "Mama, Mr. Kieran says pancakes are ready. Do you want some?" She wiped her face and nodded. Typed quickly on her phone. "Thank him for me." Brinley read it, then looked at her with those serious eyes that made him seem older than 7. "Are we safe here, Mama?" She wanted to lie. Wanted to promise him yes. Always. Forever. But she had learned the cost of promises she could not keep. So she typed, "We are safer than yesterday." He thought about that, then nodded. "Okay, that's better than before." Dinner was strange and gentle. Kieran had made too many pancakes and eggs because he did not know what Danya could eat through a straw. He blended some of it with milk and handed her a cup without making a show of it. "Tastes like breakfast soup," he said. "Not great, but it'll keep you from starving." The others ate and talked in low voices about routes they wanted to ride and parts they needed to order. Normal things. Boring things. Things that had nothing to do with courts or evictions or men who kicked women in diners. Brinley sat next to Maddox and asked 1,000 questions about motorcycles. Maddox answered every one without rushing, his rough voice softening when he explained how engines worked. Bear lay under the table, his head on Danya's foot, a warm, heavy weight that somehow made breathing easier. After dinner, Rourke walked Danya out to the porch. The sun was setting, turning everything orange and gold. He handed her a phone, newer than the one she had. Celine got it for you, he said. Clean number. Baylor doesn't have it. Neither does anyone in his family. Emergency contacts are already programmed. Police, hospital, Celine's office, and all four of us. You need something, you call. Day or night. She took the phone and typed. Why are you doing this? He leaned against the porch railing, looked out at the desert turning dark. Because I couldn't do it for my sister, he said. And because you deserve more than a life spent being afraid of a drunk kid with a rich daddy. And maybe because I'm tired of watching towns like this crush good people while bad ones walk around like kings. He turned back to her. You don't have to trust me yet, Danya. Trust is slow, but you can believe this. While you're under this roof, nobody touches you or your boy. Not Baylor. Not his father. Not anyone. We've all drawn that line. You're inside it now. If you've ever needed someone to draw a line and mean it, comment. I stand with her. Every voice counts when the bullies are listening. Inside, through the window, Danya could see Brinley laughing as Bear tried to climb into his lap. She could hear Kieran's low chuckle and Theron's teasing voice. For the first time in 2 years, the knot in her chest loosened just enough to let a full breath through. Not safety. Not yet. But close enough to remember what it felt like. The first blow came 4 days later, not with fists but with paper. Celine called early in the morning, her voice tight. They're filing for emergency custody of Brinley. Danya's stomach dropped through the floor. She grabbed the phone so hard her knuckles went white. Who? She typed, even though she already knew. Thaddeus Breslin himself, Celine said. Claims you're unstable, homeless, unemployed, and living with, quote, unknown men of questionable character. He's asking for temporary placement with a family member or state custody, pending a full hearing. Danya's vision blurred. She typed with shaking fingers. They can't. They can try, Celine said. And in a town like this, with a judge who owes favors, they might even win temporarily. But we've got ammunition too. Hospital records showing what Baylor did. Proof that the eviction was retaliation. Statements from Rourke and his brothers. Character references. And the fact that Brinley is safe, fed, enrolled in a new school as of yesterday, and showing no signs of distress. Rourke appeared in the doorway. Danya looked up at him, panic written all over her face. He crossed the room in 3 steps. What happened? She showed him the phone screen. His jaw tightened. When's the hearing? Tomorrow, Celine said through the speaker. 10 a.m. I'll be there. So will Dr. Quinn. And if you want, so will all 4 of you bikers, clean-shaven and looking like choir boys. Rourke almost smiled. We'll be there. Danya grabbed his wrist, typed fast. What if they take him? They won't, Rourke said. But his voice carried an edge now, something cold and final. Because if that judge even thinks about putting a 7-year-old in state hands while his mother's jaw is still wired from her landlord's boot, the whole country's going to hear about it. I've got friends in journalism. So does Maddox. This stops being a quiet local story real fast if they push it. That night, Danya lay awake in the dark, listening to Brinley breathe through the thin wall. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Every shadow at the window looked like Thaddeus Breslin's reach stretching toward her boy. She typed a message to Rourke even though it was 2 in the morning. Can't sleep. His reply came back in seconds. Me neither. Porch. She found him sitting on the steps with a cup of coffee, staring at the black horizon. He poured her tea from a thermos without asking and set it beside her. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she typed, I am sorry I brought this to your door. He read it, then looked at her with those storm gray eyes. You didn't bring it, Danya. It followed you. There's a difference. Men like Thaddeus and Baylor, they hunt. They look for people alone. You're not anymore. That makes you harder to hunt. She wiped her eyes. Who was your sister? He took a slow breath. Her name was Ainsley. She was a teacher. 28. Lived 2 towns over from base. Started dating a guy named Trent, deputy sheriff, clean record, everyone liked him. By the time I came home on leave, she had bruises she said were from tripping. Voice that shook when he called during dinner. That look, you know the one. Like she was always waiting for the next hit. I told her to leave. She said she would. But then I got deployed again. Iraq. Then Afghanistan. Emails got shorter. Calls stopped. One day her neighbor found her on the kitchen floor. Trent said she fell. No witnesses. Investigation went nowhere. He still wears a badge. Danya reached over and put her hand on his. He didn't pull away. That's why I'm here, he said. That's why we're all here. Kieran lost his daughter to a custody fight rigged by money. Darren watched his mom get beaten by a man whose family owned the judge. Maddox grew up in foster care because the system protected the wrong people. We're all carrying someone we couldn't save. You and Brinley, you're the ones we can. She typed slowly. What if we lose tomorrow? Then we appeal. We go loud. We make it cost them more than it's worth. But Danya, he turned to face her fully. You're not going to lose. You've got truth, evidence, and people who won't walk away. Thaddeus is used to scaring people into silence. He's not used to people who've already seen worse and didn't blink. Morning came too fast. They dressed in clean clothes. Rourke and the others shaved, combed hair, looked like men you'd trust with your taxes. Danya wore a borrowed dress that Celine had brought, soft blue, nothing flashy. Brinley stayed with Mrs. Greeley, who'd driven out to the house before dawn with fresh muffins and the promise that she'd guard that boy with her life, if needed. The courthouse felt like swallowing stones. Thaddeus Breslin sat in the front row with his lawyer, an older man in a suit that cost more than Danya made in 6 months. Baylor was absent, confined to house arrest, but his shadow hung over every bench. Thaddeus did not look at Danya. That was somehow worse than if he had. It meant she was beneath his notice. A problem to be handled, not a person to be faced. The judge was a woman Danya had never seen before, brought in from another county. That was Celine's doing. She'd filed motions about bias and conflicts of interest until the local judge recused himself. This one, Judge Mirren Calhoun, had short silver hair, sharp eyes, and a reputation for not caring whose name was on the town hall. She called the hearing to order. Thaddeus's lawyer stood and painted a picture of a woman in crisis. Jobless, homeless, recovering from trauma, living with strangers, unable even to speak. He suggested that a child needed stability, routine, family support. He offered the Breslin household as temporary guardians, citing their resources and community standing. Celine stood next. She was calm, precise, and ruthless. She entered the hospital photos into evidence. She read Dr. Quinn's report aloud, every clinical word landing like a stone. Bilateral mandibular fracture, avulsed teeth, defensive bruising on both wrists, caused by blunt force trauma consistent with a kick from a booted foot. She held up the eviction notice, time-stamped 2 hours after the bail hearing. She introduced Rourke and his brothers, all veterans, all with clean records, all willing to testify. Then she called Dr. Quinn to the stand. The doctor walked up, sworn in, and spoke with the weight of 20 years in that town. I have treated 3 other women with injuries caused by Baylor Breslin, she said. None of them pressed charges. All of them left town within months. This pattern of violence, enabled by his family's power, is well known and well hidden. Ms. Creel is the first woman brave enough to say his name out loud in a courtroom. Punishing her for that bravery by taking her child would be a grotesque miscarriage of justice. If you believe a mother shouldn't lose her child for standing up to her abuser, hit subscribe and share this story. Algorithms listen when enough people care. Judge Calhoun listened without expression. She asked Thaddeus's lawyer if he had evidence of current neglect or harm to the child. He did not. She asked if the child had been evaluated by social services. He had, just yesterday, and the report said he was healthy, happy, and showed no signs of distress. She asked if Ms. Creel had missed any court dates or violated any terms. She had not. Judge Calhoun looked at Thaddeus for a long, cold moment. Then she spoke. Mr. Breslin, I understand your concern for the welfare of children. However, this motion appears less about the child's welfare and more about punishing his mother for pursuing criminal charges against your son. I will not be a tool in that effort. Motion for emergency custody is denied. Ms. Creel retains full custody. This hearing is closed. The gavel came down like thunder. Danya's knees buckled. Rourke caught her elbow, held her steady. Celine turned and gave her a small, fierce smile. Thaddeus stood, face red, jaw tight, and walked out without a word. But his silence said everything. This was not over. Not for him. But for the first time, Danya realized it didn't have to be over for her either. She could keep fighting. And she wasn't doing it alone. 2 weeks passed like water over stone, slow and wearing. Danya's jaw began to heal. The swelling went down enough that she could see her own face again in the mirror, though it still did not look like the face she remembered. Dr. Quinn removed the wires on a Tuesday morning, and for the first time in 17 days, Danya opened her mouth without metal holding it shut. The first word she spoke was her son's name. Brinley. It came out rough and strange, but it was hers. Brinley hugged her so hard she thought her ribs might crack. "You sound like you again, Mama," he said. She laughed, even though it hurt, and held him until he squirmed away to tell Bear the good news. The dog wagged his approval and knocked over a chair in his excitement. Life at the house settled into a rhythm. Danya took online applications for jobs in towns far enough from the Breslin reach. Celine filed motion after motion, building a wall of legal paperwork that made retaliation harder and costlier. Rourke and his brothers rode out most mornings, came back by dinner, and filled the house with the low hum of easy conversation. Brinley started school in the next county, a 20-minute drive that Kieran handled without complaint. The boy made a friend, brought home drawings, stopped flinching every time a door opened. But underneath the quiet, tension built like a storm no one could see yet. Baylor's trial date was set for 6 weeks out. The prosecutor, Maris Dunley, called Danya twice to prepare her testimony. "Are you ready to sit in a room with him and say what happened?" she asked. Danya's hands shook just thinking about it, but she said yes anyway, because the alternative was letting him walk free, and that was no longer something she could live with. Then the threats started. Not loud ones. Not obvious. Just small, careful reminders that the Breslins had not forgotten. A letter arrived at Celine's office with no return address. It said nothing directly threatening, just a list of other cases Celine had worked, other clients, other addresses. The message was clear. "We know where you work. We know who you help." A brick went through the window of the diner where Danya used to work. The owner, a man named Horace who had always been kind to her, called to say he couldn't rehire her even if she asked. "Too much heat," he said. "I got a family. I'm sorry." Rourke found a tracker under his truck one morning, a small black box held on with a magnet. He crushed it under his boot and said nothing to Danya, but she saw it in his face. The tightness around his mouth. The way he checked the windows more often. If you've ever watched someone use fear as a weapon when the law wouldn't work, comment enough. Every voice makes it harder for them to hide. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Danya was in the kitchen making sandwiches for Brinley's lunch when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. A voice she didn't recognize, male, calm, said, "You should have stayed quiet, Danya. Now your boy's going to pay for your mouth." Then the line went dead. Her hands went numb. The phone clattered to the counter. Rourke was there in seconds. "What happened?" She couldn't speak. Just handed him the phone, pulled up the call log, pointed. He listened to her broken explanation, jaw tightening with every word. Then he made 3 calls. One to Celine, one to Deputy Cates, one to someone whose name he didn't say, but whose voice on the other end sounded military and sharp. "We're moving you," Rourke said. "Today. Not far, just different location. Rotation. Makes you harder to track." Danya wanted to argue, wanted to say she was tired of running, but fear for Brinley overrode everything. She nodded. By noon, they were packed. Kieran drove Danya and Brinley in his truck, windows tinted, route changing twice. Rourke and the others followed on bikes, staggered, watching for tails. They ended up at a small cabin an hour north, tucked in scrub pine and red rock. It belonged to a friend of Maddox, a man who asked no questions and kept no records. The cabin had 2 rooms, a wood stove, and a porch that looked out over nothing but empty land. Safer than safe. Isolated. Quiet. That night, Danya sat on the porch while Brinley slept inside. Rourke sat beside her, rifle across his lap. Not because he expected trouble tonight. Because he wanted her to know he was ready if it came. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she said. "But I'm still here." "That's something." He nodded. "They're escalating. That means they're scared. Scared people make mistakes. We just have to outlast their fear." She looked at him. "What if they don't make mistakes? What if they just keep coming?" "Then we keep standing," he said simply. "That's all there is. You stand until the other guy blinks or breaks. And Danya, you've already lasted longer than they thought you would. That scares them more than anything." She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that standing was enough. But she had spent too many years learning that standing often just meant getting hit harder. The call came 2 days later. Celine's voice on the line, breathless and furious. "They're offering a deal." Danya's heart sank. "What kind of deal?" "Baylor pleads to a lesser charge. Misdemeanor assault. No jail time. Probation, fine, anger management classes. In exchange, all civil suits get dropped. You sign an NDA, and they leave you alone. Danya closed her eyes. And if I say no, then we go to trial. Fight it out in front of a jury in a town where half the jury pool works for Breslin companies or rents from Breslin properties. It's a risk, Danya. A real one. But it's your choice. Danya sat with that choice for an hour. Paced the cabin. Stared at Brinley's sleeping face. Thought about what taking the deal would mean. Safety, maybe. Silence, definitely. And the knowledge that Baylor Breslin got to walk away, got to keep being the man he was, got to do this to someone else someday. She called Celine back. No deal, she said. We go to trial. Celine was quiet for a beat. You sure? I'm sure. If I take that deal, I teach my son that rich men don't have to answer for what they do. I can't teach him that. I won't. Celine's voice softened. All right, then we fight. See you in court. The trial took 3 days. The courthouse filled with people who had never cared about Danya Creel before, but cared now because the story had leaked, because reporters from 2 counties over had picked it up, because someone, probably Maddox, had made sure the world was watching. Thaddeus Breslin could control a lot of things. He could not control the internet once it decided to pay attention. Danya sat in the front row, hands folded, jaw still stiff but healing. Brinley stayed with Mrs. Greeley, safe and far from this room. Rourke and his brothers filled the benches behind her, a wall of leather and gray hair and silent solidarity. Every time Danya felt herself faltering, she glanced back. They were still there. Baylor sat at the defense table in a suit that made him look younger, softer, almost innocent. His lawyer was good. Painted him as a young man struggling with alcohol, stressed by family pressure, who'd made a terrible mistake in a moment of lost control. He's not a monster, the lawyer said. He's a man who needs help, not prison. Then Maris dumbly stood and methodically destroyed that narrative. She played the diner's security footage. Showed Baylor entering drunk, grabbing Danya, threatening her. Showed the moment the boot came up. Played it twice. The courtroom went silent. One juror covered her mouth. Another looked away. She called Dr. Quinn, who walked the jury through every injury with photographs projected on a screen. She called Deputy Cates, who testified about the prior complaints that had been buried. She called the 2 other women who had finally agreed to speak. Their voices shook, but they spoke. Then she called Danya. Walking to the stand felt like walking through water. Every step too slow, every breath too loud. She sat, was sworn in, and met Baylor's eyes for the first time since the diner. He stared back, jaw tight, face blank. She did not look away. Maris asked her to tell the jury what happened that night. Danya spoke slowly, carefully, her rebuilt jaw aching with every word. She told them about the double shifts, the late rent, the fear she carried every day. She told them about Baylor's threats, his grip on her wrist, his hand in her hair. She told them about saying yes to pressing charges and what happened next. She told them about the boot, the taste of blood, the sound of her teeth on tile. She told them about waking up in a hospital and learning that her landlord's family wanted to take her son. When she finished, the courtroom was so quiet she could hear the clock on the wall. Baylor's lawyer tried to cross-examine, tried to suggest she'd exaggerated, tried to imply the bikers had provoked him. But Danya had lived through worse than a lawyer's questions. She answered each one with calm, tired honesty. And every answer made Baylor look smaller. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the 4 women stood and read the verdict. Guilty. Aggravated assault. The courtroom exhaled as one. Thaddeus Breslin stood and walked out, face stone. Baylor stared at the table, hands clenched. Danya felt Rourke's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm, and let herself cry. Sentencing came a week later. Judge Calhoun, brought back for consistency, looked at Baylor with no sympathy. 18 months in county jail. 3 years probation after release. Mandatory anger management and substance abuse counseling. Restitution to Ms. Creel for medical bills, lost wages, and emotional distress. And Mr. Breslin, she added, if I ever see you in my courtroom again for anything resembling this behavior, I will make sure you serve every day the law allows. Baylor was led away in cuffs. For the first time in his life, his last name didn't open the door. It closed behind him with a clang that echoed through the hall. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Danya said nothing. Celine handled them with practiced efficiency. Rourke and the brothers formed a loose circle and walked Danya to the truck. The cameras caught it anyway. The image that ran in papers the next day showed a small woman in a simple dress, flanked by 4 bikers, walking toward a future she'd fought for and finally won. If you believe justice is worth the fight, even when the system is rigged, subscribe and share this story. Stories like Danya's need to be told until no one can ignore them anymore. 3 months later, Danya stood in a small apartment in a town 2 hours from the Breslin Reach. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that fit 1 person at a time, a view of a parking lot. But the lease was in her name. The locks were hers. And nobody could take it without a judge saying so. Brinley ran through the rooms, claiming the bigger bedroom, laughing, planning where his posters would go. Bear, who Rourke had quietly insisted she keep, flopped down in the middle of the living room like he owned it. Danya stood in the doorway and let herself smile. It hurt a little still. The dentist said the new teeth would take time to feel normal. But the smile was real. Rourke and the brothers helped her move in, carried boxes, assembled a bed frame, argued about whether the couch should face the window or the TV. Kieran made too much spaghetti. Maddox brought a housewarming gift, a baseball bat with a red bow on it. For decoration, he said with a straight face. Or whatever. Darren fixed a loose hinge on the closet door without being asked. They stayed until the sun set and the apartment felt less empty. Before they left, Rourke handed her an envelope. She opened it and found a photograph. The 5 of them at the house, Brinley on Rourke's shoulders, Bear mid-bark, everyone caught mid-laugh. On the back, in Kieran's blocky handwriting, it said, "Family isn't blood. It's who shows up." Danya hugged him, and this time she didn't cry. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." He shook his head. "You did the hard part. We just made sure you didn't have to do it alone. That's what family does." They rode off into the night, engines fading into the distance. Danya stood on the small balcony and watched until the taillights disappeared. Inside, Brinley called her name, asking if they could have pancakes for dinner because there were no rules anymore about breakfast food. She laughed and said yes. That night, after Brinley fell asleep, Danya sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her new phone. She opened her email and saw a message from Maris Dunley. "2 more women have come forward with complaints against Baylor. Your case gave them the courage. Thank you for not staying silent." Danya read it twice. Then she closed the laptop and looked around her small, quiet, safe apartment. She thought about the girl she'd been 2 months ago, terrified and voiceless on a diner floor. She thought about the women who were just now finding their voices because she'd found hers. And she thought about Brinley's question from weeks ago. "Are we safe here, Mama?" The answer was yes. Not because the world was suddenly kind. Not because powerful men had stopped being dangerous. But because she'd learned something in that diner, in that hospital, in that courtroom. She'd learned that sometimes the right stranger shows up. Sometimes standing up costs everything. And sometimes, when you refuse to disappear, the whole world has to make room for you. She finished her tea, locked the door, checked it twice, and went to bed. Tomorrow she started a new job. Tomorrow Brinley's new school had a field trip. Tomorrow was full of ordinary things, small things, safe things. And that was more than enough. Thank you for staying with Danya's story. If it moved you, share it. If it made you think, comment. And if you believe that no one should have to face their worst moment alone, subscribe. Because these stories, the hard ones, the true ones, the ones where ordinary people find extraordinary courage, these are the stories that change how we see each other. And maybe, if enough of us listen, they'll change what we're willing to accept. See you in the next story.